Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long, or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Though technically if I did believe in sponsorships, it'd probably be something like Patreon, which would be in the description if, I believed in those things. What were we even doing again? Oh yeah. The Wolfenstein series, games that harken back all the way to 1981 and are at their core really not that changed, with you sending Sig-Heiling enemies into the spirit world shot by shot. And today we're checking out another one in this lineage. It's the co-op shooter side story of Wolfenstein Youngblood, telling the tale of BJ Blazkowicz's daughters as they go out into Nazi-occupied Paris to find their father. Youngblood looks to inject a little bit of its namesake into the titles, but let's actually see if it did. Youngblood is developed by Machine Games and Arcane Studios and comes out for the PC, the Xbox, the PS4, and Switch. Basically everything, with console versions releasing tomorrow and on PC today. There are two versions. The $30 standard version gets you the game, plus a couple skins and weapon models if you pre-order it, while the deluxe version for $40 gets you the game, cyborg skin pack, a couple more models, and one buddy pass that you can pass on to a friend to play the game with you. So here we go. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. And graphics are up first. While Youngblood looks good, its appearance matches the side story it is rather than a full predecessor, though the game is set like 19 years after the other titles, which does cause you to look at some of the Nazi weapons and think to yourself, either these dudes really like wearing armor made out of tin cans and their best friends' hats, or they simply do not know how to build anything better. This is especially noticeable when the same enemies jetpack in on crude rockets, or the occasional bomb-laced robot dog runs in front of you and explodes, which is a little bit like DARPA just taking one of their $1 million robot thingies and strapping some fireworks to it and thinking, that's the height of what this thing can do. It's a waste, but it does look cool. And for the most part, Wolfenstein does as well. Youngblood has that. It can look really good, especially during battles. Weapon effects, particles, debris, and ruined elements of the game world all have a really grounded feeling to them, though it can be argued, I would say, that New Colossus did start that trend. It is elevated here in Youngblood. And one of the biggest changes here is the world. This is an open world style game branching out from the previous title Sub of Fornication we got into the Paris catacombs, with a sprawling complex for your own characters to go to various districts around Paris, some subdivided off by huge barricaded doors, secrets, and other ways to get into them. I can't say it's exactly amazing in world design, but there were some parts I liked, and there are a number of cutbacks and secrets that the world design has that allow for you to run down a couple streets to go to a choke point and get an enemy, or sneak up behind some powered-up soldier wearing the loader from the Aliens movies, outfitted with flamethrowers all over it. The game leans more towards open block, I would say, than really open city, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Another place the game tries to deliver is in verticality, and this might be some of Arcane Studios' touch in this, and it does, especially with you corner aiming as you sprint up flights of stairs only to come out into a Nazi-occupied meeting room, blast through it, and then, if you want, leaping back into the same square that you just left while your teammates down there running for their life. Sadly, though, most of the locations have two levels of verticality you can pretty quickly identify: ground floor and then usually the third floor in most of the towns, with most second floors actually cut off by debris to stop you from going into them. This feels a bit less visceral and a bit more video gamey than I would have actually hoped for. When it comes to animation's fluidity, the game looks good, always feeling quick and nimble, whether you're sneaking up behind an enemy to add an extra orifice and then pull their kidney out of it, or if you're trying to whisk through the thick lines of enemies guarding a lab without raising an alarm. All that works really well. I will say the killing animations, though, are decidedly tame here, many times with the girls just flipping the gun over and firing it back into the enemy's face, or smashing them ho-hum in the side with a pickaxe. Something about the past game's visceral wheelchair takedowns and later on full-fledged sweeps that feel like Danielson moments right out of Karate Kid, where you grabbed somebody, whisked their feet out from under them, and then ended their lives with a quickness. It doesn't really happen much here, and that feels noticeably absent. One place where the Wolfenstein games have always excelled is getting different groups into the same battle with you, and that certainly continues here. And there's a lot of different surprises depending on who you'll end up meeting, and that can really change the way the game feels. But killing enemies old or new is all only going to be fun if it runs smoothly. How does this one run? Well, it runs incredibly well, but first I have to give them kudos for the wicked assortment of graphical options they have on the PC version, from deferred rendering to all kinds of variability on a ton of settings, many in which you won't actually get on other games, and it's really nice for allowing people who have different degrees of PC power to go ahead and adjust the game and still get a good frame rate, while not making the game look absolutely terrible because they're turning off entire subcategories of graphical options. With a 1080 Ti and a current i7 at 3.5, 1440p at above 60 FPS was completely possible, sometimes with one or two adjustments in really busy spots, but 4K was actually possible as well in some of the quieter locations. With a high-end rig with a 2080 Ti, which is an i7 at 4.7, 4K resolution was usually always over 100 FPS, if not in the 130 to 140 range. Unless you're in spots with a huge number of lighting sources, then it would drop down. When it comes to the consoles, both the primary consoles, the PS4 and the Xbox, are aiming for 60 FPS, and the Switch looks like it's aiming for 30 FPS, but we'll see how that turns out on release day. Altogether, I'd say Youngblood isn't really a significant increase over the prior titles in either design or just overall sheen and polish, but what is here runs very well, and all of those graphical options will help anybody who wants to get it running on a system that maybe can't max out everything. And that brings us to sound, music, and voice.
Good. Good, all right. All right, tell me what you're sensing.
It's gonna rain soon.
5 more, Zofia. Kick! Kick! Ugh. Keep your hands up.
Hell yeah, dude.
And we're going to do sound first, and I would say this seems improved in all areas but one from the original, and really does well to solidify locations with an audioscape that I think matches perfectly with what's happening and where you are. And I think we all know those times that you're in an underground in a game and you're talking to someone and it sounds like the sound effects team turned the Fruity Loops add-on to a setting called Echo Everything. Here, there's a bit more discrete audio than I remember with the last game, and with the amount of verticality, it's very nice to be able to hear an enemy outside and think to yourself, he's on the ground floor in the center of the road, and be pretty much right using just those audio cues. This is something we're seeing a lot more games nail, and they did it well here. Now, overall processing is excellent, and layering is improved from Wolf 2, which did have a couple issues, especially on launch. When it comes to the gun sounds, they're really good. They may not be exactly accurate, and be aware, depending on your upgrade, your guns can also take on a different tonal difference. For instance, putting a suppressor on just about anything results in a Steven Seagal school of suppressors, where it sounds like you're just throwing a pebble into a can from 100 feet away. It sells stealth and the narrative of not being seen when you turn someone's head into a watermelon with eyes as you blow it away from cover, but it's pretty weak sounding, even amongst the other silenced weapons in other games. Some standouts to me have to be the electricity gun. Its spool up, that electricity gun sounds like you smashed one of those plasma globes from the 1990s and then just decided it needed all the power and you're arc welding everybody's heads together. Grenades, explosions, missiles, those sound really good as well. Lastly, you have assault rifles and a sniper rifle style gun, and they sound about what you would expect from a Wolfenstein game. But it's got a couple little spots here or there that I'd like to see them maybe change up on the next game. And that'll bring us to music. Martin Stig Anderson and Tom Salta do a pretty good job here, offering a soundtrack that doesn't stray incredibly far from the other titles in the series and thus sounds alien, nor does it stick to the exactness that many sequels seem to aim for. While it is easy to get lost, especially depending on your settings in the mixing, so be aware of that, it's good. It's got a deep, somber affair-style feel to it, and at times also has a number of almost snazzy kind of tracks from the 1980s, 1990s. I liked it, but due to the way the game plays, I did find it easier to lose the actual soundtrack in the game due to the way the title threw random situations at me. And that brings us to voice. Okay, this is just weird. The main characters sound like they walked off the remake of The Deliverance where it's been replaced by an all-female cast. I like the NPCs though. None of them offered those moments where you're like, can I turn them off, as they repeat themselves constantly. Instead, here they offer nice bits of side detail from time to time or a mission update while you're in the field. And keep in mind that Youngblood has far less cutscenes and storytelling via removing your control than the prior games did. However, again, the sisters I could just never get into. The accent doesn't seem to make much sense at the time, and their yokel-like attitude comes across really weird as they're dancing inside elevators between spots in the game world loading and other antics. It's explained a bit in the title, but overall, wasn't incredibly impressed. And that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. One thing to remember is this is 19 years since the last game, and the Nazi hierarchy is almost completely abandoned or been gobsmacked out of the other lands, aside from Paris and some others, and that's where you and your sister rush off to find BJ, who disappears randomly from the family home on a search for, well, something. What follows is a longer game than the others, and of course that depends on the difficulty you choose, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, quickly you're ushered into the story with the sisters deciding to goonie it up and steal an FBI airplane with one of their friends to go find your father, setting up main base in the catacombs beneath Paris. The game is actually played out from the main hub, taking random missions as well as main missions that further the story. This means one second you might be fighting through an enemy complex to destroy the robot guarding a Zeppelin, and then later on going in and stealing plans for a new robot enemy the Nazis are making. Also, one thing to know is that Youngblood swings almost completely into the technical side of enemies, and the supernatural hijinks of the past games are put a bit on the back burner. As you progress through levels, you get experience that raises your level, money to buy items, as well as skill points to upgrade the characters, and that is something different from the prior games. Combat itself is fluid enough. It's got a nice long slide you can employ to flit up underneath enemies, kill animations from stealth, and various skills that can turn you from a papier-mâché version of BJ dying easily to low and high skilled enemies alike to outfitted and armored and equipped death machines, showing up and just laughing as the Nazis try to take you on. Gunplay in this feels about standard for the Wolfenstein games, so if you like those, you'll probably like what's here. I will say, though, that it does feel spongy still when it comes to the enemies. Sometimes this will have you thinking, man, this has all the effectiveness of me just yelling bang at the bad guys and giving them a really bad case of pink eye next week. Most of the reason this is the game rewards headshots and weak point attacks religiously, and the anarchy these games are known for can make that feel a bit odd. Also, this gets a little bit worse depending on the difficulties as you go up. What happens is you end up playing against the anarchy the game seems like it wants you to create. Now, when it comes to the missions variety, this is okay with you going and turning in the side missions back to those who gave them to you at the main base, and also a number of daily and weekly missions that you can do in some locations. When it comes to co-op versus AI, I'll just say that both work really well. They work about the same overall. If you're solo, the game's AI takes over, and for the most part, it's pretty okay. I wouldn't say it's great, but for me, it did keep out of the enemy's sight if I was sneaking and backed me up when I went down. And to get friends to join you can do private, friends, or open to anyone games, as well as you can join randoms. There is no split screen. Now that brings us to other facets of playing this game, though, namely the gun and character upgrades that I talked about earlier. First, the guns. Each gun has a number of upgrade spaces, and each of those has 3 slots for the type, giving you the ability to mix and match a suppressor with a heavy receiver on a gun that lowers accuracy but gives the gun's rate of fire basically chainsaw status. And sure, you may not be hitting the enemy as much, but risk getting up close and you can do some serious damage. Each upgrade also has a level for improvement you can add when you get to a particular level of character, and matching upgrades of various types nets you a bonus. So sometimes mixing isn't the best bet, and instead going with all of the harder hitting types of upgrades can work, especially because you can switch them out at will, and you might end up meeting that one enemy who doesn't move around as quick but has a tremendous amount of damage they can take. Now, when it comes to characters upgrading, you have mind, muscle, and power, with skills in sets of 4 in there that increase in buy price as you go up. Skills range from picking up more ammo, healing your sister if she gets hurt in battle, and what happens after that, being able to move full speed and stealth, and a number of other skills. Now, I won't say the skills are all that crazy. In fact, they are mundane. Most are rather basic, but they do allow for you to play a different way if you team up with somebody. For example, where I chose basic upgrades like health and armor and co-op, Takedown, shout out to him for playing the game with me, picked stealth and the ability to pick up the enemy's larger weapons they drop, and there was a big difference in how they played. That being said, it's not as wide of a difference as I would have liked in the long run for a game like this. You also have a huge number of cosmetics for every single gun, as well as your character's body and helmet. And all of those cost money that you get in the game. The developers have said that there'll be a store, there's a store tab, and they say that you'll be able to buy any of the cosmetics you want, but nothing else. I'll inform you if something magically changes and it's really difficult to get money in the game. But right now, it's not too hard at all. Lastly, you also have these things called Pep Signals, which remind me of the air guitar moments from Army of Two, with you doing the robot or other random gestures, and basically mini celebrating kills or just cool stuff in the game world, and that gives a short perk. When it comes to Youngblood as a whole, I'd say there was a lot of things I liked. The gunplay overall was pretty fun. The upgrading the skills for the characters did add a unique feeling the game's prior titles didn't have, and the levels, even though they didn't take grand advantage of verticality, made some battles enjoyable as hell, especially with co-op. One thing to remember, though, is that the AI Watsons around you, so you are pretty much going anywhere and they're stuck to your hip like a toddler at a mall. They're not going to be running off on their own. Sadly, Youngblood has a number of issues that really hurt my enjoyment. First, the placement of the enemies is one of them. When you clear out an area, you don't need to go an incredible distance away before they become regurgitated back, like food to a baby bird, just popping back into existence. Or if you just cleared an area, then you go into another and get a side mission, because many of those are given in the field. You can turn around and go back, and the enemies are just standing there with a full group of people to destroy you. Speaking of the enemy AI, I would say that one of the things it does is it doesn't really take advantage of the open environments. You'll never see them go into high ground, or at least very rarely. Mostly instead just rushing to greet you like they're hungry for bullets, and you're the one handling the lunch line at the local soup kitchen. It's not to say it was always bad, because many times it wasn't. Them rushing straight forward to do the most damage to the weakest point possible worked many times and did end up killing us depending on the difficulty. But I would have liked to have seen a bit of polish there. I have no real issues with Youngblood going open city, or at least open block like they've done here, and I think some of the elements actually work really well. Others, though, feel like they needed one more pass on the does this need to be here kind of design document. But when we think about it, many titles are more than the sum of their parts, and that brings us to fun factor. It was actually fun for a lot of the time we played. I liked the co-op, and I had a fun time there, and the different ways you could play the characters was enjoyable, and it did add some longevity. Also, some of the weapons were really enjoyable to use, but that fun was hampered by the game also doing weird things like locking a number of items and hidden secrets behind locations in past places you've experienced, behind doors that could only be opened by shooting them with guns you get later on, requiring you to slog back there and look for some door that you remember could only be opened by a particular laser gun, and then opening it and finding that there's some coins inside, which really wasn't a very good payoff and doesn't seem like a good reflection of open world game design overall. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale if it's a PC title. And I would say this is a wait for a sale. The price does help this. $40 gets you 2 games, or at least the normal game and a buddy code, and $30 gets you the normal game. There is this coolness about going open world that I think Wolfenstein is trying to do, but it never really hits it just right. And we see some more issues, I think some of them more problematic than the ones we've seen in the prior games, sort of crop up when this kind of design decision has been made, and we see that here. It's just not really for me. Might be for you, and I can see some people liking it if they're playing it a bunch, they're with their friends, and they're really not putting too much thought into it. It can certainly be enjoyable, but for me, the more I played it, the more issues I had. It wasn't something that popped up in 1 hour. It was 3, 4, 5 hours down the road, and things slowly building up to make me sort of not want to return to it. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. I would love for you to check out Reddit and Twitter. And of course, especially with everything being demonetized these days, most likely this video will be, you can always come to Patreon and be a patron there for the channel. That helps me continually buy every single game I get, even if a developer gives me a code. As you guys know, I buy every game that I get. But also, it just helps you join a great community and a really cool place to be. Awesome people there. And hey, you get some merchandise as well. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.